Good morning, this is Houndog Steve wishing you a very pleasant morning. And I don't know if you recall, but a couple of years ago I did some videos on Crown Land patents and how important they are. And actually it's been kind of interesting because in the meantime I've come across a lot more Crown Land patents that people have gotten. And wow, I didn't realize some of the conditions that can be put into these Crown Land patents. And over in Bancroft, for example, one patent I saw basically strips away most of your mineral rights. So maybe not quite as powerful as we thought they were going to turn out to be, but it certainly does keep on the front burner the whole idea of property ownership and landowner rights. Now, I'm going to leave the link below to the Ontario Landowners Association, and here is your Crown Land application, Crown Land patent application form and information booklet. And now I see that they have added a 29-page primer, and it is full of all kinds of interesting information. It is by Elizabeth Marshall. I've met Liz. She's a very, very interesting lady and a very intelligent lady, and she's done some excellent research. And this is a really good background of where Crown Land patents came from, what they do, and how they work in the common law situation. So definitely, please, it's a free download. So you can't go wrong as long as you've got a printer. So for the cost of the paper and a little ink, you can find out everything you need to know about Crown Land patents. And I've had a lot of people contact me from other provinces. It's exactly the same process. It's just you go through your provincial Ministry of Natural Resources to get your application. Okay, there's one for Ontario, well actually one for every province. So you just have to go to your own MNR and get your application, and same process. So it's not too difficult at all. But the other thing I wanted to address in this video, you may have been reading that some people in Toronto, I'm sure elsewhere, have been losing properties because somebody has switched the title. And now my friend Peter Weigang and I made a video about this about 5 years ago. I can't believe it. I was looking at it the other day, 5 years ago. Now I'm going to link this video below, but I'm going to cut out the relevant piece. It's just a few minutes long, but it will highlight what has happened and why this is now taking place, and that we did warn about this 5 years ago. Okie dokie, so let's go over to that and we'll come back and I'll do a quick wrap up. Okie dokie, here we go.
MPAC boasts about its accurate property assessment, and that's just rubbish. There's no such thing as an accurate property assessment. All you can do is get a market value, and market values can come from realtors, and they also come from this firm called Teranet. Teranet is something we need to speak about. Okay, before we do that, I want to explain to you carefully what happens when you take a written database and change it into a digital database. This is our business card for citizens of direct democracy. Here's my name, Steve's name, John Snyder's, and here's our telephone numbers. Now I've put them into columns like this. Column of first names, second names, phone numbers. Now these in internet stuff, this is called a field. So we've got 3 fields, and you normally see these on a spreadsheet. Now I've coloured them, so in order, the first field, the first name is a green field, and the second name, surname, is a blue one, and the phone numbers are here. If you take this information and you put it into another spreadsheet, you need 3 fields to get the information in. But the land registry, which we're talking about, which gives us the value of our house, etc., etc. It's got a whole lot of stuff in it. Names, dates, maps, liens, all these things are in there. So an intelligent person says, I will look at all the stuff we want, and then I'll make my spreadsheet so that it all fits in. But that is not what happened. When Teranet set up, it borrowed a software program from India, and the number of fields in that software didn't fit our registry, our land registry in Ontario. So what in fact happens is they say, well, we got 3 things to put in, but we've only got 2 fields. So one of them we can't put in at all. Oh, too bad. But what happens is that you lose valuable information. You've got the 3 names of the people, but you can't phone them. So this is completely useless. And this is exactly what's happened in the transfer of the information from our government into Teranet. And this is how it happened. The Ontario Land Registry was here. It goes back hundreds of years. Many of the documents were handwritten, and that's why I made this all nice and squiggly. There was a shell corporation created, and there was a secret contract. And what happened is that the government sold to this shell corporation the rights to run this whole show. And eventually it trickled through to Teranet. But in the beginning, there were no staff, there were no money, and there were no expertise. So this was a nothing organisation. Here was a cunning sleight of hand. Basically says, we will sell this to you, and then you fix everything afterwards, and you'll give us a lot of money, and that would go into the government. So Teranet, they've developed it, and they own it. This is terrifying. They actually own the Ontario Land Registry, and they operate this thing, the electronic one. Now the same thing they tried last year in England, and this was the reaction there. Privatization could destabilize all that is held dear, and by this they mean title to your land and your property, and lead to a chaos and mayhem for the housing market for the sake of a short-term return to His Majesty's Treasury. So in England they know exactly why this is. This kind of thing is to pump money into the government to pay down the debts, to make them look good, or to pay their salaries. So this is how this came about. But we're not finished. OMERS, the Ontario Municipal Employment Retirement System, is very wealthy, 72 billion. This is the money that pays out pensions and things. But it owns a company called Borealis, and Borealis owns Teranet. So this is a very strange thing, because the people actually think that because it's called the Ontario Municipal Employees, that it's owned by the government. It's not owned by the government at all. It's a private company, which owns this, which owns this. And this group owns all the documents for the land ownership. And this Teranet is related to Equifax. And because they made Equifax Canada and Teranet Inc. signed a strategic partnership. Now the word strategic is a bit dodgy, but you can see something not very nice must be going on. Equifax has gone through a scandal that's hacked this year. It had 57,000 complaints. So these two are linked together. And lo and behold, up here, MPAC and the Ontario government and Teranet, they're all mixed in together as well to form this standardized digital database. The result of it is that these people can manipulate the land registry database, and you end up with something called title theft. And what happens here is you can erode the database very easily if it's in digital form. It's not so easy if it's a piece of paper. And suddenly you find that you can't prove that you own the property on which you live. And this chap here, Mark McDermott, who is an expert in this field, he gave a speech which I listened to the other day, and he's furious because his mother lost their farm by exactly this process. So here's a lot of mucky stuff. It's all tied up with politics and banks and so on and so forth. And it's something which a direct democracy government would never permit to happen in the first place. So we've got the situation where representational government has betrayed the people. Let's just look at some of the recent ones. The 407 scandal. I looked this up, and we, the taxpayer, actually spent $100 billion to buy the strips of land which now have the 407 running through them. And it was sold for $3.1 billion. This is scandalous, because the truth is that the $100 billion was slipped in over the years in terms of taxes, and the $3.1 billion was pumped into the coffers of the Ontario government, and suddenly we can pay off some of our debts or pay higher wages to our civil servants. Next one, cancellation of the gas power plants. 2013. That cost us 950 million. But the key thing is here, and this is under investigation now. The $10,000 was paid to somebody to go in and clear off the hard drives so that all the emails now cannot be found, so they cannot be used in the courts. Sale of Hydra 1, again, against a strong public opposition. It was a madness. Its object was to pump money into the coffers to pay down debts, etc. The lucrative contracts to green energy producers. Nobody fully understands that when Ontario actually already produces more more electricity than they can actually use. Selling databases is the latest thing. We know that databases of information are traded regularly on the internet because customers and so on, customer lists are very important for selling stuff. But when you start selling the information that's held in trust by the government to a private organisation, then I think that you cross the line. And sell off the proper and dutiful obligations of government. By this I mean that if you're working for the government and the government has taken your money to put into a pension plan, then it should be the government which is managing that pension plan, not sending it off to somebody else who's making a big profit out of running it for you.
So, to be quite honest with you, the situation is not good. I'm wondering if having a Crown Land patent, and I would still recommend everybody get one of these if you can for your property regardless of what it says, because at least it gives you some claim, some connection to the property, okay? So that if somebody does get into the Teranet website and changes over your name to somebody else's or re-registers it and then tries to sell it, you have at least got something to go to court with and say, hey, listen, I have the Crown Land patent on this property. Look, this is all the information, this is all the background, and it lists me as the previous owner. And because as it stands, it's looking like you don't have a leg to stand on. Once this information has been transferred, it's assumed and deemed to be official. Where the province ever thought it could get the right, and this was under the Liberal government, the Wynne government did this, where they ever thought that they got the right to sell the Land Registry Office of all people, of all things to sell. I mean, as if the 407 wasn't bad enough. But, it's just insane, absolutely insane. I don't know what's going to become of this. Because it's happening now at a corporate level, it's a level that you and I are basically excluded from without either having deep pockets and lots of time, or a large enough group of people who are going to jump up and down about this. And, well, I don't see either happening. So I sure hope that this does not continue. And I'm suddenly glad that I don't own any property anymore, because this can happen anywhere and everywhere. And, if hackers can get in, well, what about people within the government? What happens if they decide that, for whatever reason, that you have said something or done something and, whoa, all of a sudden you've lost title to your home? Wasn't as easy to do with paper. There was a much bigger paper trail. You could follow that. So anyway, I'm going to leave you with that. That's a sort of info update. And please, I would apply for your Crown Land patent. It's $50. It's going to take about 3 or 4 weeks for the patent to come through. And if nothing else, you can frame it and put it on the wall. It is a nice little keepsake as to the history of the land upon which you reside. Okie dokie, if you've enjoyed this video, please like, comment, subscribe below. And in the meantime, this is Houndog Steve signing off, wishing you a very pleasant morning, and we'll talk very, very shortly. See you now. Bye.